In this video, we're going to be having a think about the piece that's set for B2 in grade 4 by a French composer, a lady composer. Absolutely marvellous to see lady composers on the syllabus. I'm really pleased about that. Cécile Chaminade. And I have to say, she's one of my favourite female composers. I think she writes absolutely beautifully, especially for the piano. And you can see she lived quite a long life, didn't she? And even though she lived into the 20th century, she's very much a romantic composer. So, you know, we enter what we sometimes call the modern period, sometime around 1900. Doesn't feel that modern anymore, does it? But that's kind of what we do. And we've got romantic music before that. Well, Cécile Chaminade, born right in the middle of the romantic period. And when she gets to 1900, she doesn't see any reason why she shouldn't just carry on being a romantic composer. And I don't blame her. So that's fine. So we've got this very expressive music because romantic music is all about expression. Sometimes it's music that's about something. So this piece is called Idyll. So, you know, what's that about? I mean, it's a funny word actually, but it may be that you've got some picture of the countryside, maybe a nice summer's day when you're out in the country, enjoying the scenery and the fresh air and looking at the beautiful flowers and the trees and so on. That might be kind of a picture that would go there. Sometimes an idyll is something that people think about when they're in love or something. It's painting some kind of romance or something. Well, something like that might appeal to your imagination, or you might think, well, actually, that's not very helpful to me. But you might think about something that's going on in your life that's pleasant anyway, something that brings you pleasure, something that brings you joy, that's something you can really appreciate. That would be kind of in the field of an idyll. So you might say, well, actually for me it's my PlayStation 4. Not quite the same as a nice pleasant day in the countryside maybe, but you get the idea anyway. And it's also a piece where if you've got a title like Idyll, well, sometimes you've got all this beauty of something really nice going on, and then sometimes because it's a romantic piece as well, you feel a little bit of turbulence every now and again. And there are little bits of that in this piece, you know, where you just sort of feel it's all moving along very gently. And you think, yes, all is well with the world, and I've got this beautiful picture going on. And then you come to places like bar 11 and you feel a little bit of turbulence, just a little bit of, you know. There's just a little touch of something that's just very slightly disturbing, you know. Or you get a burst of something that's a bit louder, like bar 16. And it suddenly kind of flowers open. Well, you know, that could be just a slight change in the mood. So you're looking for this very peaceful, beautiful mood, but at the same time, you're looking for little moments where it might just be disturbed a little bit. Anyway, if you want to know about Cécile Chaminade, it tells you a little bit about her at the bottom of the page, including the fact that she wrote around 200 piano pieces. So if you like this idyll, well, there's another 199 pieces that you could go for. So that should keep you busy and off the PlayStation for a little bit. Anyway, let's have a little think about how this piece of music is put together, and then we'll be thinking more about the mood of it and what's going on. Basically, this piece of music is in ternary form, like quite a few pieces on the grade 4 syllabus. Now, that means it's got 3 sections. We call the first section A, the contrasting middle section B, and then usually it finishes with the A section coming back. Sometimes it's repeated exactly, sometimes it's different. In this case, it's repeated exactly. Now, a lot of composers, when they come back to their A section, can't resist sort of changing it a bit the second time. But some composers just think, oh, let's have it the same as it was the first time. And that can be very effective. I tell you what, it's also really good news for us because it means you can learn the A section of this piece and then you think, oh, I've still got loads to do. But then when you go on to the second page, you think, hey, all that stuff I just learned comes back again at the end of the piece. So even though you've got all these notes to learn on 2 pages, actually you haven't got as many notes to learn as you think. So there you are, that's one piece of good news. Now, where do these sections begin? Well, the A section starts at the beginning, no surprise there, and it starts straight away with the main melody in the right hand. We don't have an introduction. Sometimes you can have an introduction in the ternary form, not in Cécile Chaminade piece. The B section starts in the second half of bar 16. And it's just the mood changes there. We get this louder dynamic. We move to a different key. We start the whole piece in C major, but when we get to the B section, we go into G major, which is known as the dominant key. So dominant is the fifth. So start in C major, count 5. C, D, E, F, G. So because G is 5 above C, it's the dominant key. So that's G major for the B section of the piece. And it kind of goes through one or two other little bits of colour with the key as well. And then we come back to the A section in bar 32. So it's good to know when that A section comes back and you're back on familiar territory. Now, Cécile Chaminade tries to paint this structure a little bit by asking us in bar 31 to play a poco rit. Okay, rit is short for ritardando, slow down a little bit. Poco means a little. So a little slowing down a bit. It sounds a bit funny when you translate it, doesn't it? But what it really means is don't make too much of it, but just slow down a little bit there. And then notice in bar 32, she writes a pause. So it's just a chance to think, here's the end of the B section. And then have a pause, and then, here we go. Back to the A section again. So you see how that's there, designed to help draw out this ternary form structure. And then notice there's a poco rit right at the end as well. So there's the next poco rit, and she's put that in just to make it clear to the audience that we're kind of finishing the piece. Sometimes pieces want to kind of sort of charge into the last bar and have a dramatic finish. Quite often pieces need a little bit of just a slow down at the end, just to settle the piece at the end. Okay, so that's how the big kind of structure of the piece works. Now, let's now dig down and think, well, what's happening with the individual phrases in this piece? So let's go back to the beginning. This starts with a 4-bar phrase. Because it's a romantic piece, we quite often have quite long phrases that are very expressive. So the first 4 bars. That's your first phrase. Okay, then the second phrase starts halfway through bar 4. So when we start not on the first beat of a bar, but in this case on the second beat of a bar, we say that it's an anacrusis or an anacrusic start. So we have an anacrusis at the beginning. We're starting 2-1. Do you see how that works? And then this next phrase is copying that anacrusis idea. So we get a lot of these anacrusic starts. So the second phrase, starting halfway through bar 4, well, here's the second phrase. So you can hear that that's the second phrase, and it's a kind of response to the first phrase. So the first phrase, you might say, well, that's little a inside the big A section. The second phrase is kind of little b. It's not completely related to the A section, but it's got the little a idea, but it's got certain things in common. But then what happens when we come to the next phrase, which starts in the second half of bar 8? Well, we get a kind of rerun of the first phrase, which then changes towards the end. So do you notice this? At the end of bar 8, this is very similar to the first phrase. All the same here, all the same here, but then it changes. So you hear, oh, there's something different happening there. And it's one of those little bits of colour and drama that we talked about, isn't it? So you see what's happening? First phrase is kind of little a, second phrase is little b, third phrase is kind of little a, slightly altered. And then the fourth phrase is another 4-bar phrase, which we're going to call C because it's doing something different. So this is the second half of 12 going down to 16. And then when you get there, you sort of think, oh yeah, it does feel like it's the end of the phrase, but it also feels like the end of the section. It's quite an emphatic cadence when you have that, you think, oh, I could go home now. That's the end of the piece. No, it's not over yet. There's more to come. But it sort of feels like we've come to the end of the section. And you notice quite often these emphatic cadences, you get this in the bass. Hot cross buns. And that's what we've got in 15 and 16. G, G, C. So that's kind of making it a bit more emphatic. So when you get there, you can just kind of think, yep, I'm going to make that kind of happen. So I feel the end of that A section. But the big A section has got these four-bar phrases, and we've seen how they kind of relate to each other. Okay, so now we go into the B section, which is also anacrusic, starting at the end of bar 16. And we've got another 4-bar phrase, but it's a different kind of phrase, and we've gone into a different key in G major. So now we've got this, and it's louder. So you see what's happening there. And you might feel, actually, when I play this, it feels a little bit more agitated. I might want to just push forwards a little bit there. That's something we might come back and talk about later. Then we have another phrase starting on the anacrusis at the end of bar 21 and across the page. Now, do you see, we've had all these 4-bar phrases. Now suddenly we've had a 2-bar phrase. It feels kind of like, oh, that's a bit more urgent. It's all over in half the time. And you feel a bit of colour, a bit of drama in the second half of 21 with this chord. So there's 2 bars there. Then at the end of 22, we have another 2 bars. So what's happening here? So that's another 2 bars. Then at the end of bar 24, anacrusic start to the next 2 bars. Okay, and then another 2 bars, end of 26. Which is kind of repeating a lot of what we've just heard, isn't it? So you might think, well, do I want to play it exactly the same twice, or do I want to make it a bit more urgent the second time, or maybe slightly louder the second time to slightly vary it? You can colour it in a way that kind of strikes you as working well. Then in the second half of 28, we've now got a 4-bar phrase to finish. So we've had all these kind of more urgent 2-bar phrases. Now we've got a more expansive 4-bar phrase. With this slow down that we talked about into the pause. And then of course we're repeating the A section, and that's exactly as it was before. So we're beginning now, aren't we, to dig down and really see what Cécile Chaminade was doing in writing this piece. I don't know about you. I mean, some people will think, oh my goodness, do I need to know all this stuff? Well, maybe you don't. But lots of people just sit and they play notes. It says G, so I play G, you know, and that's how it is. But actually, if we're going to get engaged in the music, we want to understand, well, who was Cécile Chaminade? What was she about then? And what's this piece? What is this idyll? What picture have I got in my mind that belongs to that title? And then how do I feel these moments that are beautifully relaxed and other moments that are a little bit more troubling or a bit more passionate or a bit more urgent? How's she written this thing, this ternary form? How's she done these phrases, these 4 2-bar phrases? What do they mean? How can I play them in such a way that one phrase responds to another, or one phrase repeats another? Is it more urgent the second time, or is the second time a bit more relaxed than the first time? One player might make one decision, another player might make another decision. That's called interpretation. But interpretation shouldn't be just kind of like, well, I just play that because it kind of feels good. We should be thinking, why am I doing this? Because I'm trying to bring Cécile Chaminade's music to the world. I'm not saying, well, Cécile Chaminade might have written some notes a few years ago and now I'm going to do my own thing with it. You are going to do your own thing with it to some extent, but your own thing is got to be to kind of really illuminate what Cécile Chaminade was doing. This is the great joy of music. Do you know what? I'll let you into a secret. Practice is a bit boring. Now, you might be surprised to hear me say that because I'm a professional musician. What do you mean practice is boring? Do you ever think that? Do you ever sit down to do your piano practice and think, oh, it's a bit boring? I'd rather be playing football, doing the PlayStation, doing ballet. I don't often think I'd rather be doing ballet, I must admit. But anyway, or PlayStation or football comes to that. But anyway, that's another matter. But practice is a bit tedious. You know, learning notes, which finger do I need? What's the rhythm here? But Your reward comes when you get to the point where you think, you know what, I can play all these notes, I can play all these rhythms, and now I'm going to make music. And that's what I'm trying to talk about in these videos. How do you learn the piece, but then turn it into music and make it really exciting? And then you can put your heart and soul into it, and you can really make it expressive and make it really work. Do you know, in all my years of examining, I heard lots of different people play lots of pieces in lots of different ways. Sometimes hearing the same pieces thousands of times all around the world. And it absolutely fascinated me. Some people would play the piece absolutely perfectly from start to finish, but without any expression in it. Okay, well, you give them credit for that. If you can play the whole piece, you've done hours of practice. You've really gone to town on it. That's great. Some people actually played some wrong notes, made a few mistakes, maybe even hesitated a little bit, but they kind of really expressed the music. Now, which performance do you think I preferred? Actually, I always felt I'd be much happier to forgive a few mistakes if somebody is expressing music and making it really work than somebody who's just sitting there being a robot processing notes. Because you might as well just program your computer to play the piece if that's what you want to do. Of course, what's ideal is when someone can play it all accurately and can make it really expressive and musical. And I can think of a number of performances over decades that I've heard that I don't mind admitting have moved me to tears because somebody's played it really accurately, but then they've brought so much understanding and insight to the piece that I can think of some performances that I've heard thinking, well, that's taught me how to play this piece now, and I've been deeply moved by it. Well, that's what we're trying to do, aren't we, when we play music? It's an emotional communication, an emotional expression of ourselves and a communication with the audience. And even in the exam room, there might only be an audience of one, but there's an audience. That's what this is all about. Right, okay, let's talk about a few other things in this piece. So Cécile Chaminade has said at the beginning, play this piece allegretto. Well, allegro is fast, lively. Allegretto is generally just a little bit slower. So in other words, we just need to judge it, don't we? There's a suggestion that an editor has made. We know it's an editor because it's in brackets. So Cécile Chaminade didn't write that, but an editor says, I think this would be about the right speed, about 72. You could play it a bit faster, you could play it a bit slower. If you play it too slowly, it's going to be really ponderous. You're going to feel 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Some people will play it like that, even in a grade 4 exam, believe it or not. It's not going to work, is it? Some people will think, hey, I'm going to show them that I can really play this piece. And it's going to be right, electric fingers, absolutely fantastic. But it doesn't make any sense. And it just sounds like they've got a bus to catch. They're in such a tearing hurry to get through the thing. So choose a sensible speed. This piece of music is in 6/8 time. Now we know that to be a compound duple time. So 6/8 means there are 6 quavers, 6/8 notes in every bar, but it also means there are 2 dotted crotchet beats or 2 dotted quarter note beats in each bar. So don't feel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because that's going to be like, whoa. Try to feel 1, 2, 1, 2. So when you're learning the piece, you might want to count 6 just to make sure you've got all the rhythms sorted. But as soon as you can count it in 2, that's going to help. 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Do you see how that's going to help you really get that idea across? And because we've got 2 beats in a bar, sometimes it works quite well to feel the first beat a little bit more strongly than the second beat. Not dramatically strong, but just push the first beat, step back a little bit on the second beat. Sometimes works very well. And then Cécile Chaminade says dolce. Okay, sweetly. If you go to an Italian restaurant and you see dolce on the menu, that's telling you about the ice creams and the chocolate pudding. Always a good bit to look for. But dolce, sweetly. So trying to make a really sweet sound. Then she writes bien chanté. So she writes something in French, which is fair enough because she was French. And that means let it sing out, well sung really, bien chanté. So we've got to make the right hand feel like a song. What's the left hand doing? The left hand's accompanying. So do we want the left hand to go? Some people will do that, believe me. And actually, that's going to kill it. If the left hand's too noisy, doesn't make any musical sense at all. So the left hand is accompanying, the right hand needs to be projected a bit more than the left hand, and it needs to sing. So think, does it want some crescendo, some diminuendo, what we call some shape? And 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. You see, there are ways of just putting a little bit of shape and it starts to sing, and that left hand kind of gently in the background. So really, that's what's happening throughout the piece, isn't it? The left hand is always accompanying, the right hand is always projecting the tune. So if we can make the tune sing in these phrases that we've talked about, if we can shape it with a few crescendos and diminuendos, we're going to achieve dolce, bien chanté, compound, duple time in 6/8. It's all going to work absolutely beautifully, and we'll get the sense of the idyll coming across. Okay, let me talk to teachers for a few moments about what's happening with chords and keys and so on in this piece. You might want to stay with us for this, or if it's all too much, have a few minutes on the PlayStation or doing the ballet and come back and join us. So we're in the key of C major. We've got the anacrusis at the beginning. Bar 1, of course, we're talking about bar 1 being the first complete bar. Interestingly, starts on a 5/7 in second inversion and then adds a 13th in the right hand, that 13th at the end of the bar. So we're not starting by establishing the tonic chord, we're kind of starting a little bit in the air on this dominant chord. Furthermore, dominant 7th in second inversion, and then we're adding colour with that 13th in the melody with a lovely expressive rising 7th. That's something that you might want to get your students to think about painting. Bar 2, 5/7 again, last inversion. Bar 3, chord 1, first inversion, moving to chord 4, second half of the bar. Next bar, bar 4, chord 1, first inversion for the whole bar. Bar 5, 5/7, second inversion for the first half of the bar, chord 1 in the second half of the bar. That chord 1 in the second half of bar 5 is also a pivot that's taking us to G because it's chord 4 in G. We get to bar 6, suddenly we're in G major. We've already moved to the dominant key. 5/7, second inversion for the first half, 1 in first inversion, second half of 6. 7 goes 1 in second inversion, followed by 5/7, last inversion, interestingly. Then when we go into 8, we've got chord 1 in first inversion. So it's a perfect cadence, but it's just slightly in the air, isn't it? Because of the inversions, which is interesting. And that pulls us on to the next phrase. Okay, so second half of 8 is 1 in first inversion. 9, we've got the 5/7 second inversion that we had back in bar 1, with the 13th coming back in the second half of the bar. Then we've got the 5/7 in last inversion again in bar 10, as we did before. When we come to bar 11, a little bit of movement here. Notice the B flat in the left hand, which is making this a 5/7 first inversion in the key of F, going in bar 12 to chord 1 in F. So what's this? A little bit of movement, but it's kind of a secondary dominant function, isn't it? Of 5/7 to 1 in F, because 1 in F is 4 in C. Notice another little touch. We've got bar 11, the C major chord, the dominant of F, but then the G sharp at the end of the bar augments the chord 5 to pull us onto the chord 1. So there's a little bit of chromatic colour that has a kind of harmonic impact as well as a melodic impact. Bar 12, we've got 1 in F, but of course it's also 4 in C. Bar 13, chord 1, second inversion. 14, chord 4, first inversion. Second half of that bar, we've got chord 1, starting second inversion, couple of passing notes onto chord 1 in first inversion. Then 15, the hot cross bun cadence, 1 in second inversion, 5/7, 1. Then we're starting the B section, second half of 16. 17 is in the key of G, a 5/7 in last inversion. Notice the 9th and the 13th, the last two right-hand notes of that bar, again adding colour through extension. 18, 5/7 last inversion, moving to 1 in first inversion. So that was 18. 19 is 5/7 in last inversion again, with the 9th coming that E in the right hand, but the last note slightly different to what it was in 17, you'll notice. Okay, and then last bar of the page is all chord 1 in first inversion. Turning to the second page, bar 21, 5/7 last inversion, then a nice diminished seventh. So 5/7 last inversion, diminished seventh. Now you could say the right hand E sharp and G sharp are simply chromatic double lower auxiliary notes. That is true. But with the left hand, it also gives you a diminished seventh. So harmonic colour, again, as well as melodic colour. 22, 5/7, kind of starting in last inversion, but kind of going root position, as it were. 23, 1 second inversion, diminished seventh in the second half of that bar. Interesting when you get there with an appoggiatura, very expressive note, something just to paint. 24, chord 1 second inversion. 25, 5/7 last inversion with the 9th and the 13th added again. 26, 5/7 last inversion, going to 1 first inversion at the end of the bar. 27, 5/7 last inversion with the 9th being used on the second beat in the right hand. 28, 1 in first inversion. But of course, this is a G major chord, which is acting as a pivot back to C, because Cécile Chaminade is moving back to C in preparation for the return of the A section. So bar 29 in the key of C, we've got chord 4, it's a kind of sort of 4C. Notice the appearance of a dominant pedal point from this point, these G's at the bottom that permeate the remaining bars of the B section. Obviously, the dominant pedal point building an expectation of resolution to the tonic. So as kind of a preparation for a return to the A section. So where were we? 29 is a chord 4 going to a 5/7. 30 does the same again, it's 4 going to 5/7. 31 is 1. And then there's this rather kind of juicy little corner just going into the cadence where we go 5/9 in G to 1 in G. So kind of interesting little sort of twist of a secondary dominant there, really. Hint of, oh, I'll be back in G major at the end of the B section. We started in G major, we finished G major. So is it a secondary dominant or is it a modulation? Anyway, using 5/9 as well to give you a bit of colour. When you come to 32, the pause chord, of course, is 1 in G, but it's also a pivot because it's 5 in C, and then that takes us back, and A section is as before. So that's the chord life of the piece. Right, everybody, come back and join us if you didn't stay with us for that. So your teachers might well talk to you about some of the things that we've just talked about that would help in performance. But drawing attention to any notes that don't belong to the key, like the G sharp in bar 11 and the B flat in bar 11, they're things you might just want to colour, little surprises like that. Bar 21. Oh, that's a lovely bit, isn't it? A sort of slightly juicy chord there that you might want to paint. Bar 23. Oh, that's a nice bit as well, isn't it? So listen out for the juicy bits where you get accidentals that you're not expecting to kind of come across, and you can paint those. That'll be great. Anyway, your teachers will tell you more about that if you want to know about it, I'm sure. So we're now really getting into what this piece is about, projecting this beautiful singing right hand melody accompanying in the left hand. You might want to think about your pedaling. There's pedaling marked in the score, that's always useful, isn't it? So put the pedal down when it says ped, bring it up when you see the little oop at the end of the pedal. And you might notice there are some differences actually. Look in bar 1, you see the pedal marking is to go down and hold on to it for the rest of the bar, even though there's a rest in the left hand. But in bar 2, you put the pedal down and then you bring it up for bar 2. Maybe because the right hand is moving and Cécile Chaminade wants that to be nice and clean. The next bar, you put the pedal down, you bring it up as you put the second note down. So go through the pedaling and just be really sure that you've got all that in your head. There are bits that are marked without pedal as well, aren't there? So when you come down to 14, 15, 16, there's no pedal there. So she's wanting that to be a slightly kind of drier sound. Places like bar 21, no pedal. then we pedal in 22, but we don't 23, 24. So have a little look at what she's put there. So we're entirely happy about the pedaling that we're using there. You might decide you want to put a little bit of extra pedaling in. I mean, that wouldn't be anything that would upset anybody particularly, but just be a bit careful. You're not smudging chord changes or smudging movement in the melody if you want to do that. Watch out for that little ornament in bar 15. You see this little crushed note, that little note with the line through the corner. So ti-ta-dum, pom, just so we've got that ornament in there. That would be a good thing just to notice. Okay, one or two little bits of articulation to watch out for. Bar 21 left hand, do you notice that? Staccato, staccato. That will be one reason why there's no pedal in that bar. So just making sure we've got that painted as well. So enjoy the singing melody, enjoy these little moments of colour in the harmony, enjoy the fact that the B section is at a bit of a contrast with the A section, paint that and make the most of the mood of that piece. And it's a very beautifully written piece, and if you're sensitive and expressive, I'm sure you'll end up giving a really super performance of Cécile Chaminade Idylle, and may it be the first of many encounters with the music of Cécile Chaminade if you haven't played any of her music before. Enjoy!